Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. Winston Churchill gave us that piece of wisdom, and I believe you would be fairly accurate if you said Churchill was resilient. No matter what the odds, he was determined to stick it out until the odds turned in his favor. Nothing was going to get in the way of his goals. Over several decades, he plowed through an excruciating number of obstacles, earning himself a place in history as a master statesman. Hello, I'm Bob Proctor, and welcome to another edition of the Freedom Series. This month, I would like to focus on why, exactly, resilience is a key factor in achieving your goals. It makes no difference if you want to serve as Prime Minister of your country or Prime Instigator of a Little League team in your community. An attitude of resilience will eventually score any goal you have for yourself. This all-important character trait began to hold a prominent position in my mind after a discussion I had had with a dear friend of mine, Jane Wilhite. Jane operates Psi Seminars. That's spelled PSI Seminars. It's a very successful seminar company that operates internationally. The two of us were on her ranch in Northern California. Jane's ranch is, in my opinion, a place everyone should visit. I refer to it as my spiritual oasis. At any rate, the two of us were discussing a couple of big losses that we had previously experienced in our lives, and we were talking about why we kept going, what kept us going. That got us thinking, what is the most important element in a person's character that enables him or her to enjoy success and fulfillment in life? We came up with a number of different answers, and Jane finally said, I believe it's resilience. If you're not resilient, you're never going to make it. Jane knew something about being resilient. Some years ago, her husband died in a terrible plane crash on the ranch in front of a class of students. She was left with a pretty sizable business. Most everyone thought she would probably sell it. Everyone except Jane. She had no intentions of selling it. She dug in her heels and built it into something much larger and more successful. A company that has helped thousands of individuals wake up and begin utilizing their true potential. Jane Wilhite is resilient. Resilience is the ability to come back after great disappointment and pain, after great loss or failure, and be truly alive. Truly alive is the key. Many people come back after experiencing disappointment, pain, great loss, or failure, but they're not truly alive. They're not even half alive. They're merely putting in time. That is really sad. It's so sad because we were meant to live fully, or we never would have been endowed with the mental tools that we have. Resilience is absolutely essential if you want to win, and so are goals. Earl Nightingale used to say that a person without a goal is like a ship without a rudder. They're going nowhere and will probably end up being blown onto some rocky shore. And resilience is only required if you have a target that you're shooting at, a goal you're going after. If you're not going anywhere, if you're not doing anything, if you've made a decision consciously or unconsciously to just give it all up, I can safely say the word resilience isn't hanging out in your vocabulary or experience. You might conclude that it's just easier to stay down. Forget about this bouncing back ridiculousness. You wouldn't even know how to bounce back if you tried. As far-fetched as that might sound, I've met more than a fair number of people who have given up on bouncing back. They've tried something and they've failed in some way, shape, or form. And now they're stuck. They're just lying there. As Mary Pickford once said, this thing we call failure is not falling down, but the staying down. When people are stuck, they've given up on their goals. They feel sorry for themselves. They don't understand that falling down, even getting hurt, is a part of winning. When a friend or a loved one has a bad turn or endures a loss of one kind or another, they often share their misfortune with us. Unfortunately, because most of us are misguided, we have a tendency to sympathize or empathize with them. In many cases, our competitive nature takes it one step further by digging up something from our own past where we've experienced an even greater loss. As we tell our own ragged tale, we're only compounding the problem for the friend and meanwhile immersing ourselves completely in this jowl-shaking failure of whatever has been attempted. Feeling sorry for a friend does nothing constructive for either of you. It does, in fact, weaken both of you. As long as you both continue to focus on and discuss this failure, it is all you will ever continue to receive, failure. That failure energy will eventually suffuse you. In truth, it's better to lay it on the line by being very candid with them. They have to toughen up, get up, and get going. It's the goal, you see, that pushes each one of us back into the game. It's rarely ever easy, this goal we're trying to achieve. But it's only the failures and the tough times that help us become strong. It's these tough times that help raise our level of conscious awareness. I recently came across a passage from Thomas Watson, the former CEO of IBM, during its explosive growth era. He said, "Would you like me to give you a formula for success? It's quite simple, really. Double your rate of failure." You're thinking of failure as the enemy of success, but it isn't at all. You can be discouraged by failure, or you can learn from it. So go ahead and make mistakes. Make all you can, because remember, that's where you will find success. Thomas Watson understood resilience. It's a process, you see, that earns us the right to receive the good we desire. In professional sports, we frequently see a hockey player drop to the ice or a football player lay down on the field, but they don't stay there. They get up and get going. The only thing on their mind is scoring the goal, achieving the good that they desire. The only thing on your mind should be scoring the goal as well. Keep going after the good you desire, and it will eventually be yours. Whenever I talk about failure and resilience, I have people ask me about the grieving process. I don't want you to mistake whining and complaining, the stuckness that I've just mentioned, with grieving. Grieving is a normal and a natural mental process we experience when we've lost a loved one, whether that loved one is another person or even a pet. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a groundbreaking book on death and dying, which outlined the usual stages of grief that people must pass through in order to emerge on the other side. These phases include shock and denial, then searching and yearning, a disorganization phase when people first start making attempts to readjust their lives around their loss, and then finally reorganization, where they're able to move forward in life. This again is where resilience plays a major role. If you or friends or loved ones are grieving, have patience with this process. Each person must go through these stages in their own time and way. Granted, some people do get stuck in the middle of this grieving phase, and they require intervention and help from others. A very fine line exists between healthy and necessary grieving versus what can become negative and destructive. At this point, especially, it's very important that people understand we are souls on an eternal journey. We don't have a soul, we are a soul. Each one of us is gifted with an intellect and, for a period of time, are living in a physical body because it is our purpose here on earth to become aware of our oneness with God and to strive to become more like God. As souls housed within these bodies, we are in a constant evolution of growth and change. We live in an ocean of motion. There's absolutely no end to life. So when a loved one leaves us here on this physical plane, it's important that we understand they've merely moved on to a different phase of their eternal journey. As Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says, When we have passed the tests, we are sent to earth to learn. We are allowed to graduate. We are allowed to shed our body, which imprisons our souls. Death is simply a shedding of the physical body, like the butterfly shedding its cocoon. It is a transition to a higher state of consciousness where you continue to perceive, to understand, to laugh, and to be able to grow. When you understand this truth, you begin to comprehend why death, like birth, should be celebrated instead of mourned. Resilience is so important. Even as he gave the eulogy at his own son's funeral, Theodore Roosevelt understood this truth. He said, "Only those are fit to live who do not fear to die, and none are fit to die who have shrunk from the joy of life." Both life and death are parts of the same great adventure. All of us who provide service and stand ready for sacrifice are the torchbearers. We run with the torches until we fall, content if we can pass them to the hands of the other runners. Theodore Roosevelt got it. He was an enlightened individual. He understood that life would deal blows, failures, losses, and defeats. He also understood when we step back from life itself, we rob ourselves of everything that's good, great, or grand in life. If you're going to get on with the purpose of your life, you must put on the armor of resilience. It's simply part of the journey's package. Before reaching the summit of Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary failed miserably. In 1951, he failed again in 1952. And his expedition endured tremendous hardship, pain, and suffering, again in 1953, as they made their way to the top. But he was not to be deterred. He wasn't going to stop for anything. Sir Edmund Hillary was the quintessential definition of resilience. He had the ability to come back after great disappointment and pain, after great loss and failure, and he kept coming back truly alive. Wilma Rudolph was the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in one Olympic event. At the 1960 Rome Olympics, Rudolph became the fastest woman in the world, breaking world records in the 100 and 200-meter races and anchoring the U.S. team to gold medal victory in the relay. Rudolph's Olympic performances were spectacular, but it is the story of how she got there that makes her accomplishments legendary. Talk about resilience. She was born prematurely in 1940, weighing just 4.5 pounds. The bulk of her childhood was spent in bed. She suffered from double pneumonia, scarlet fever, and later contracted polio. After losing the use of her left leg, she was fitted with metal leg braces when she was 6. At that moment in her life, she made a commitment to figure out a way out of the leg braces. Even at this early age, resilience was beginning to speak through her. Wilma grew up in a poor family, the 20th of 22 children who loved and cared for one another. Her brothers and sisters took turns massaging her crippled leg every day, and her mother drove her 90 miles round trip to Nashville Hospital for therapy. Despite whooping cough, measles, and chickenpox over the next 3 years, Wilma was out of her leg braces at age 9. 2 years later, she was dominating the family's backyard basketball hoop, and she went on to become an all-state basketball player. Then Ed Temple, the Tennessee State track coach, came calling. Though she'd never considered track as a sport, Temple recognized her potential. While she was still in high school, she began training for Tennessee State. She had natural ability she couldn't explain. "I don't know why I run so fast," she said. "I just run." Because of her national college records and her gold medal Olympic wins, Wilma paved the way for African American athletes, especially women. Bob Kersey, the husband and coach of Jackie Joyner Kersey, says that Wilma was unequivocally the greatest influence for African American women athletes in history. Shortly before her death in 1995, she said her greatest accomplishment lay in creating the Wilma Rudolph Foundation, a not-for-profit amateur sports program. I remind these kids every day that triumph can't be had without struggle, she said. Triumph can't be had without struggle. That's resilience. You could easily think she invented the word. Wilma's story reminds me of another I heard years ago about another world record runner in the 1930s. When Glenn Cunningham was 6 years old, he and his older brother Floyd had the chore of starting a fire in the schoolhouse stove every morning. One February morning in 1916, the kerosene container had accidentally been filled with gasoline, and the stove exploded. Floyd was killed instantly, and Glenn's legs were so badly burned it was feared he would never walk again. After several weeks in bed, he was able to walk on crutches. Finally, he got rid of the crutches, but as he later said, "It hurt like thunder to walk, but it didn't hurt at all when I ran. So for the next 5 or 6 years, about all I did was run." Glenn went on to become one of the world's record-setting runners during the 1930s, winning the prestigious Sullivan Award in 1933 as the nation's top amateur athlete, after setting the world record for the mile run. Because of circulation problems caused by his childhood accident, Cunningham needed nearly 1 hour to prepare for each and every race he did, first massaging his legs and then pacing himself through a long warm-up period. But he never gave a second thought to the extra effort. Glenn Cunningham understood resilience at a subconscious cellular level, you see. He later finished 4th in the 1932 Olympics and took the silver in the 1936 Olympics. Are you getting the idea of how important resilience is to your success? If you haven't already, you can and should turn resilience into a habit. Resilience is the ability to come back after great disappointment and pain, after great loss or failure, and be truly alive. In my Success Series audio product, I recorded a message on Courage Conquers Fear. In that message, I talk about Shun Fujimoto, a Japanese gymnast who fractured his right leg during Olympic competition. Rather than set out the remainder, he continued to compete in a plastic cast that encased his entire leg from his hip to toe. As he stepped up to compete in his final individual event, the doctors on the sidelines couldn't believe what they were seeing. He performed a flawless routine, flipping to a rock-solid landing and receiving the highest score of his life. Knowing his leg virtually shattered on the landing, doctors couldn't believe he didn't collapse in screams. Shun Fujimoto admitted later, "Yes, the pain shot through me like a knife. It brought tears to my eyes. But now I have the gold, and the pain is gone." Theodore Roosevelt once said, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumph, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits, who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in that great twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." You might wonder, who in the world would concede to living in gray twilight? Unfortunately, all the people who are stuck. The people who don't want to get up and try again. That's where they live. And even people who seem to bounce back but still carry a mournful or bitter stigma with them. The people I think of as not being truly alive. They too reside in this gray twilight. They're wounded mentally. They're just putting in time, looking for pity or someone to commiserate with them. In his book, As a Man Thinketh, James Allen put it very well. Circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself. What does your current circumstance reveal about you? How are you showing up to others? Think of the individuals you know who've been downsized or re-engineered, or to be very candid, have been fired. Through no fault of their own, they find themselves out of work. The company might have been taken over where the new owners wanted to bring in their own regime. Whatever the case, after a number of years of dedicated service, the individual finds himself on the street, rejected, dejected, and bitter. The rejection and resentment is all this person can talk about. This isn't a circumstance to be taken lightly. Whether it was fair or not, it happened. It's real pain for this person, but if this person wants to enjoy any degree of quality in his life, he's going to have to get over it. And the sooner, the better. It's high time that he begins looking for what's good in the situation, learn from it, and get back to living life, fully alive. Remember, resilience is the ability to come back after great disappointment and pain, after great loss or failure, and be truly alive. Every one of us has had moments, possibly even days or months, of feeling rejected or resentful. Some time ago, I too found myself stuck in a great twilight of resentment. I had trusted someone in a business situation, and I had been betrayed. Now, this might have been only my opinion or perception of the situation, but let's face it, our perception is our reality. I was left holding the bag on a sizable business debt. The individual who walked out told me to just bankrupt the company. The thought of bankruptcy just wasn't part of my nature, so I accepted the responsibility, got up, and kept going. After a few weeks of paddling in my own self-pity, even I grew tired of the swim. I forced myself to take my first step toward shore. I began looking for what was good in the situation. Let me tell you, this act alone was an enormous effort because, on the surface, not a single thing about this situation appeared to possess a shred of goodness. But it was only when I began looking for the good that I found it there. I realized that what had happened to me hadn't interfered in my ability to trust people, even other business associates. I had taken a substantial hit, but I still trusted others. You know, I mentioned hockey and football players earlier. If you think about it, these professionals are trained to look for the good. Can you imagine getting flattened 20 or 30 times in a single afternoon? Every single time that player goes down, his subconscious mind is already in the middle of the program. It's looking for the good. In a split second, the scan is done and the results are tabulated. His fingers are moving. His toes can wiggle. He doesn't have any bones jutting out at odd angles and his head isn't bleeding. All is good. So he heaves himself up and trots back to the huddle, just 40 seconds away from yet another flattening. In contrast, I didn't have much to complain about. For one thing, I knew I wasn't trotting into a quagmire of a business situation that was going to flatten me again. I had learned my lesson. I found myself eager to move on. My resilience had kicked in. Several years ago, a dear friend of mine in a very distasteful situation had worked his way from the bottom of his organization to become the senior vice president of a major financial institution. While serving in that capacity, his company was sold. The new organization brought in their own people, and for a few weeks he wondered when he was going to get his pink slip along with a number of others. But strangely, they didn't let him go. They didn't even ask him to move out of his office. They just kept taking responsibility away from him until he had nothing left to do. Now, for some people, having no responsibility or deadlines at work might be a wild dream come true, but as my friend's responsibilities were withdrawn day by day, his self-esteem began to suffer. He was down. He was depressed. He was sitting there in that gray twilight, yet for some reason, he just wouldn't resign. I was having breakfast with him one morning, and we were both dressed up to head into our respective offices. I asked him why he was even going in, and he wasn't quite sure. I said, "Why don't you go home instead? Get into an old pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, light a fire in the fireplace, sit back in a comfortable chair, and just think." I also suggested that on his way home he stop and pick up a notebook or journal that offered blank line pages. I said, "Begin to think of all your wins. Go back to the time when you were a child in Boy Scouts or grammar school and start writing your wins down one after another. It's not necessary you follow any chronological order. Just keep listing them as they come into your mind. When you can't think of any more wins, start to think of what you would really like to do. Then make up your mind you're going to do it. He took my suggestion, and that is what primed his resilience pump and got his creative juices flowing again. He became truly alive. Just weeks later, he and a business associate from Nashville bought the Canadian rights for a franchise financial planning company. My friend quit as senior vice president and began his new company at an empty desk in my office. At a ridiculous speed, powered by his enthusiasm, my friend's new company grew to a national presence in Canada, with offices right across the country. And before he passed away years later, his company became a multi-million-dollar organization. It was this simple exercise that caused him to take his mind off what was wrong in his situation, or, God forbid, what was wrong with him, and help him focus on what was good, first within himself, and then with the people and events he had affected in his life. Once he was able to focus on the wins in his life, he was better able to see the opportunity that was staring him in the face. He realized that the people who bought his company he'd previously been employed for had actually liberated him. They had permitted him to move forward and to do something he had only been dreaming of doing for years. You see, your wins in life don't just stop one day. You're not assigned a set number of wins in life when you first arrive on this planet. You don't just use them up and then sit there like a lump for the remaining duration of your days. If you've won before, you'll win again because it's part of you. It's your MO. You're supposed to win. It's in your blood. Recognizing this greatness within you and anticipating the greatness ahead of you, that's resilience. That's when you know you're truly alive and ready for more. Is there risk involved? Absolutely. When I got tired of swimming in my own bitterness and headed back to shore, I knew there'd be risks in setting up my organization again. When my friend resigned his position and began a new company in his mid-50s, he was taking a risk. When Glenn Cunningham decided, as a 6-year-old kid, to try running a few steps because it might not hurt as much as walking, he was taking a risk. Achievers do not achieve without taking a risk. In fact, risk and resilience are closely associated. The great philosopher Bud Wynn once said, if a person's not resilient, he will rarely take a risk because he fears failure. No matter how hard you work for success, if your thought is saturated with the fear of failure, it will kill your efforts, neutralize your endeavors, and make success impossible. If a person is resilient, although he will analyze the risk carefully, he will still walk to the edge and let go. This person knows deep within his soul that if he fails, he can always get up and get going again. No matter how bold or bodacious you might think he is, you've got to admit Donald Trump is about as resilient as they come. Trump was born in Queens, New York, and though his entrepreneurial father Fred began Donald's business education early in life, at about age 4, Donald wanted even more than his father had achieved. So, after college and graduate school, he packed up his belongings, pocketed his nearly empty wallet, and moved to Manhattan. Within days of moving into the big city, Donald managed to negotiate his way into Manhattan's most exclusive business executives club. A club, mind you, that had little interest in empty wallets. Donald wasn't interested in yachting or Nantucket trips. He was there for one reason only, to network with the club members, and network he did. In just a few years, Trump had transformed himself into one of the most powerful real estate moguls in the 1980s, with ownership of whole buildings such as Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, Trump Park, the Plaza Hotel, and the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. Aside from his own shuttle airline, he also owned a yacht allegedly worth $100 million and had procured a professional football team as well. But despite his knack for making unusual, against-the-grain deals, Trump's billion-dollar empire crumbled in 1990 when he was forced into bankruptcy for more than $2 billion in bank loans that he couldn't pay. On the day he declared bankruptcy, he told reporters, "Anyone who thinks my story is anywhere near over is sadly mistaken." Resilience is Donald Trump's second name, Donald Resilience Trump, who you'll often hear referred to as the Donald, then proceeded to pull off one of the most remarkable business turnarounds in history. Thanks to some uniquely clever moves, Trump bounced back by the end of the 1990s, this time with even greater wealth than he had first accumulated. An associate of mine recently told me that while meeting with a Manhattan billionaire as a potential client, he asked her if she would be willing to swing by a restaurant with him to briefly meet with Trump. Much to her surprise, she found herself having dinner with the two billionaires and told me it was certainly one of the most memorable events of her life. She said that as she sat there in the middle of their conversation, it occurred to her that neither gentleman even once mentioned bad economic times or rumors of financial loss on the horizon. This chance dinner meeting occurred at a time when all the rest of North America was up in arms about job losses, the stock market freefall, and rumors of war. Yet, not once did any of these matters come up between these two financial magnates. They were only interested in talking about their new business ventures. The energy at the table was incredible, she told me. And then she said something very interesting to me. She said that it wasn't as if they were avoiding talking about the potential risks and rumored opinion out there. That negativity wasn't even in their heads. Resilient people aren't interested in making space for failure. So, when they do go down, they bounce right back fully alive. Mistakes and failure are factored into the risks they've got to take, but it's not something they're going to brood on or stew on. Somewhere well past their conscious mind, they know that a focus on what could go wrong is only going to bring that very thing to pass. They're more interested in stepping up, moving forward, being truly alive. Some people look at these billionaires and immediately climb onto the resentment ride. Not many of us get to be billionaires. And why is it that billionaires seem to keep on being billionaires no matter what happens? It's because the majority of these mega wealthy people are being rewarded for extraordinary service. You can always tell what a person is doing for the world, but what the world is doing for the person. The universe is governed by laws. Emerson said that cause and effect was the law of laws. It's not uncommon for individuals who are always wishing something good could happen while they're living from payday to payday to resent the super wealthy. Resenting the successful is not wise, regardless of how justified you may feel. Resentment is an extremely destructive emotion. An old mentor of mine used to say that resentment is like throwing dust in a strong wind at someone. It does far greater damage to us than to its intended recipient. It's not difficult for an unaware individual who say they're down on their luck to resent the successful person, especially if he knows the successful person personally. It's also very easy for a person to feel guilt if she made a mistake and blew it, and she knows that she blew it. Resentment and guilt are partners. One's the flip side of the coin to the other. I will resent you, which is an extremely negative emotion that I'm directing toward you, and feel guilty about something that I might have done, which is an extremely negative emotion that I'm directing toward myself. Regardless of how justified you may feel for being emotionally involved with either one of these demons, clearly understand they are inappropriate emotions and can only do damage. They can never do good for anyone and will ultimately do damage to the person who holds them. That is why forgive is such a liberating concept and is encouraged by all religions and therapists. Forgive means to let go of completely, abandon, to see only the good in the situation or the person. Remember that resentment and guilt are not good bedfellows with resilience. They will never go together. The resilient person has no time for either. The resilient person can blow it time after time, but that's where it stops. They blow it, they get back up, dust themselves off, and get going again. Follow their lead. You're not supposed to beat yourself up for failing. Everything that happens, good or bad or indifferent, is and has been absolutely essential to make you the person you are, to prepare you to do whatever it is you're going to do. Think of it this way. Your purpose in life, as we have already stated, is to become aware of your oneness with God. In places it's stated, you've earned the right to sit on the right hand of. We could compare the development of your awareness as a mountain that you're climbing. The summit, of course, would be the ultimate, where you at last become aware of your oneness with that which is. The goals you are striving for are always a higher point on the mountain, and you will experience both success and failure as you are climbing in their direction. Remember Churchill's quote? "Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm." Since you might be wandering up a hill you've never been up before, you never really know what you're preparing yourself for beyond the goal that you're working on. You are powered by the emotional appeal of the future promise that you will ultimately reach the summit. And as long as you have a true grasp on the ultimate purpose of life, you know that you are on your way to becoming aware of your oneness with the Creator. When you understand this for yourself, it's easier to understand the same for other people. For the successful people who touch your life daily, as well as the successful people you see sailing across your television screen in their $100 million yachts, remember, your attitude starts with your choice of thoughts, which cause feelings, and your feelings, in turn, are expressed in actions. Your attitude is everything, and everything in life is governed by law. The law of polarity states that everything has an opposite. For every negative, there's a positive. There's something positive in every situation, and that's the good you must seek out and focus on. Where you see someone's meteoric rise or financial windfall, focus on the positive. Write down what's good about this person's success, period. Until we start to enjoy the other person's success for them, we will not experience success for ourselves. We are, in fact, keeping success at bay from our own lives. When we can truly enjoy seeing other people win, we are putting ourselves in a winning vibration. And being in a winning vibration, we begin attracting it to ourselves personally. The information leading up to this point can make an enormous difference in all areas of your life. I'm going to suggest for the next 30 days, make an irrevocable commitment. You're going to stay out of the great twilight that Roosevelt referred to. That you're going to be truly alive. That anytime anything goes wrong, small or large, you're going to laugh. Really laugh about it. Get into it. Something wrong happens. And then repeat it aloud, I am resilient. I am resilient. There's no way I'm staying down. I'm on my way to the summit. Now, I want you to listen to this again right now. Start it over. This is Bob Proctor, and I'm resilient.